canceled that whole meeting in New Orleans. So what was good about it is they were gonna charge us for one night because we missed the 72-hour deadline. So Randy told me yesterday, he said, they canceled the meeting, can we negotiate? And we were gonna go, oh no, we're not gonna charge you. So we're just not charging anybody. But I think what happened because they canceled so quickly, like on the first order, I canceled that they hadn't come up with a policy yet.
Wondering if that was actually too.
Nobody else got
I want to call to order the July 12th, 2019 board meeting. Y'all were so quiet before I called it to order. It was like, I've totally managed this classroom well. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the people on live stream. Do we have any changes to the agenda? There being none, we will move to the action agenda. And our first order is a Public School Choice Act appeal. And the presenter will be one of our attorneys, Jennifer Dedman.
Good morning. We have 3 of these today. They're all under the Public School Choice Act of 2015. The Public School Choice Act allows a student to attend in a non-resident district, a district in which they do not live. They can submit a school choice application form to their non-resident district no later than May 1st. If the district has decided to accept or deny the student, they must send out a letter by July 1st. Once the parent has received a notice of denial, the parent has 10 days in which to appeal. There are a few limitations. If the provisions of the school choice law conflict with the provision of an enforceable desegregation order, the school district can submit proof to us and we can grant them a waiver from participation in the School Choice Act. There is also a limitation, a 3% net maximum limitation on school choice transfers each year from a school district. That is a net maximum limit on school choice transfers. Once they have reached that 3% net maximum limit, they can decline to release any additional students from their district through public school choice. A district can set standards concerning the acceptance or rejection of a school choice application, and that can include the capacity of a program, class, grade level, or school building. A district can claim a lack of capacity under public school choice only if the school district has reached at least 90% of the maximum authorized student population in that program or class, grade level, or school building. The standards cannot include academic achievement, athletic or extracurricular activity, ability, English proficiency level, special education needs except as allowed under capacity, or previous disciplinary proceedings except for expulsions. Are there any questions? Okay. Our first school choice appeal is for the Creekmore family. Ms. Creekmore is here today. All of the speakers will need to be sworn. People who speak have 5 minutes to begin with an opening statement, and then 20 minutes to present their cases. So because Ms. Creekmore is already here, we're going to begin with her.
Would all of those who plan to give testimony in the Creekmore consideration please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Hi, I'm Whitney Creekmore. I'm the mother of Pagelyn Creekmore. She's 5, and we went to Southside for preschool, and she's going into kindergarten, and we were wanting her to go back to Southside since she was already a student there, made friends, loved it. I love Southside School. We live in Midland School District, but we're only 2 miles from Southside, and we're 20 miles, or 20 minutes, give or take, from Midland Elementary. It's the opposite way I go to work. I'm a deputy at Independence County, and for me to take her to school, I drive my cop car every day, so the only way that I can go is if it's on my way to my work, or, you know, on a call or anything like that. It has to be on my way. I can't go out of my way to take her. And since she's 5, I do not want to ride in a bus. I think she's too young, and school's crazy. So that's the only way that I can transport her to school, is if it's on my way to town, which is Batesville, and Southside is, and Midland is out of the way. My grandparents also help me to transport her back and forth to school, because I don't get off in time, so they have to pick her up. And they were my next door neighbors, so it's just easier for us to go to Southside than it is to Midland, and I personally don't like Midland School. I was a student there, and my sisters are a student there now, and I don't think it's right for my daughter.
Is there anything else?
No,
You
that's
have a lot of time left. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
The stated reason for denial was that the Midland School District had reached the limitation cap for allowable transfers. We do have the non-resident district here. Is that correct? The non-resident district is entitled to time to speak, but I believe Superintendent Womack is also here. Is that correct? Okay. So if you have questions for him, he's also here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rich, do you have anything? My presumption is you made the denial based on their saying they were at capacity.
Yes, we'd love to have any family that wants to be part of our school district. Personal dilemma, I understand.
And state your name.
Roger Rich, Superintendent, Southside School District. We love any child that wants to be a part of our school district to have that opportunity. Personal dilemma, Dwayne Womack's a great gentleman, Midland School District. I have the utmost respect for both of those. Creekmore family is an awesome family as well. So tough decision for you to make, and I'm sure you'll make the best decision for the child and for the family. So we'd love to have them if we have the opportunity. If not, we totally understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm
Dwayne
gonna,
Womack,
yes, go ahead.
Midland School District.
Yes, I'm going to ask this question, and only because yesterday we discovered that some of the districts had not accurately figured their net 3%, like the number going out, the number coming in, and then the net. So have you looked through that and?
Yes.
you-
We met our 3% on the net. What
Okay.
we submitted was a net. We brought in 5, so we extended down 5. And some of the ones, now, Ms. Creekmore, their application was like 2 from the cutoff. But we had some turn in later. We had 5 turn in later that met those 5, but they had siblings going elsewhere. So they got priority over the next 2 or whatever that was on that list.
Okay, and are you a K-6 school?
We're K-6, 712.
Okay, and do you know if the number of, I know the October 1st ADM is what you figure off of. Do you know if the number of 6th graders leaving and the number of kindergartens coming in is the same number?
I do not believe it is. Right now, we're sitting around 27 kindergarten kids that's enrolled for this upcoming year, and we're moving up about 32 or 40 6th graders.
Okay, so that would have almost made your 3% number go down. Okay, that's all I have. Does anybody else have a question? Ms. Newton?
I'm a little bit confused on the dates on the application. She's got a date of 3/4/19 on the application. When did you reach your 3% cap?
We received her application on March 6th.
Okay.
February 28th would have been when we reached the cutoff, with the exception of those 5 we moved in, And then we had 5 parents turn in applications from March 8th all the way down to we received one of them May 2nd, but it was mailed to us on April 30th. But all of those had siblings attending the school they're choosing to, so they got priority up above the other.
Okay, okay. That was my question.
Anyone else on this side? Over here? Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I have one more question. Apologize. You said you had 27 kindergartners coming in, so
I believe that's
are
what
you
our
gonna have to
enrollment
have
right now
two
is.
kindergartens?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask a
Yes,
question?
Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Dedman. Ms. Dedman, have you, in your conversations with any of the parties after the denial of the school choice application, do you know if there was any conversation about board-to-board transfer, legal transfer between the districts?
In some of the cases, but in the Creekmore case, I don't believe there was a
In this one?
discussion of a board-to-board transfer yet.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ms. Creekmore, what he was referring to is there's school choice and then there's legal transfers, and that's decisions between the two school boards about a transfer. Anyone have a motion or want further discussion?
I just have a question.
Ms.
about-
Chambers?
About what you were both talking about. So is that an option available?
Well, it depends on the local policies. So I think the two superintendents would probably need to answer that because I don't know what their policies are, their local policies are regarding when they hear transfer requests, if they hear transfer requests, you know, in that process.
A board-to-board transfer, or a legal transfer as we sometimes call it, is just upon the agreement of the boards. All that happens is the two school boards get together and decide we're going to allow the transfer to happen. The school districts do often have policies as to whether or not they will allow that, whether or not the parent is entitled to a hearing. The standard model policy for the state of Arkansas does entitle the parent to a hearing.
Just to clarify, that's a hearing before the local, the
That's
receiving
correct.
board, the non-resident board, or the resident district board?
I don't recall what's in the model policy, but it does entitle, I think it's the resident district, it does entitle the parent to go before their board to ask for the transfer and to be heard.
But it's local discretion.
It's a local
Yes.
discretion issue, yes.
Jennifer, I have a question for you, if that's okay.
Dr. Moore?
Yes, thank you. And I should understand this, but as far as the way applications come in, as he described, it's first come, first serve with priority to siblings. So does that mean that the decision as to who is able to transfer is made at that May 1st mark?
There's a couple of cases of priority. So when a district receives applications for school choice, they mark it with the date and time that it's received, and it is a first come, first serve. They're addressed in the order in which they're received. Now, if you were denied a school choice transfer the previous year, you do get priority the following year. So those students will also have priority. When we talk about sibling priority in your rules in the back of the packet, we're looking at section 4.04.3. If you've got a sibling who resides in the same household and is already enrolled in the non-resident district by choice, there will be priority given to that applicant. Also, if you have a sibling group, if the second sibling, for example, is the sibling that would cause you to go over your 3% cap, you send the sibling on.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion, Ms. Newton?
Commissioner, could you give us a little background on the 3% cap, why it's there, and the reasoning behind that?
Sure. So I believe the 3% cap was first introduced in 2013, and that was kind of a safety valve, if you will, because there was concern that especially smaller districts may have so many students leaving, choicing out to a neighboring district, that it would put those districts in either, financial or otherwise difficulties. And so the 3% was kind of that safeguard to provide a buffer to not necessarily prevent, but at least to mitigate a large group of students leaving on an annual basis and then putting that district at risk of physical distress or some other type of bad situation.
Thank you.
Ms. Chambers?
I don't know if it's appropriate to ask the superintendents now, but have you in the past, or would you be willing to entertain this board-to-board agreement on a transfer?
It's been the policy of the Southside School District to approve or release at any time. So that is our school board's philosophy and our practice.
I have presented that I sent letters out to the board when we approved those coming in, if they would like to do a board-to-board transfer. They took no action on it. They said, we'd do what you guys do. Their policy, they didn't want to open a door where everybody could just go.
And this is the only appeal of the others that were turned down. This is the only parent who appealed.
I believe so. But now I will say this, my board, in the 5 years I've been there, we have done a board-to-board transfer twice for extenuating circumstances, which what we thought was in the best interest of a student that we had to give them a new start at another district.
All right, thank you. And this student, will remind everyone, has not been in your district to this point?
No, ma'am, I do not believe so.
Right, okay, all right.
How many students?
Pardon?
How many students? What's your enrollment?
We're about 497 right now,
Okay.
Is that K-12?
K-12.
Anyone on this side? Anything further? Any more discussion? Does someone have, oh, yes, Ms. Chambers?
Just one more question. The calculation of the 3%, is it K through 6 or is it K through 12?
It's K-12.
It's K-12.
Is anyone ready with a motion?
I really hate this school choice stuff.
I know we're all kid-oriented, so we do.
I move we grant the transfer.
We have a motion to grant the transfer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second moved by Mr. Williamson, seconded by Dr. Hill. Let's take a name call vote.
Okay. Dr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. McFetridge?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Newton?
No.
Ms. Dean?
Yes.
6 yeas, 1 no.
Okay, you got your transfer. If you all that were here on this case want to be excused, then you may leave now. We won't take it personally. The next case is the Kennedy case. Ms. Dedman, if you will come and present that, please.
This is also a case under the Public School Choice Act of 2015. In this matter, we have the parents here. The resident district is Guy Perkins, and the non-resident district is Greenbrier. The notice of denial was issued by, turning to the page, by Greenbrier, and it's based on the 3% limitation of the resident district Guy Perkins. I'm sorry, yes, Guy Perkins schools.
If you wait just a second, for some reason, it's not pulling up on our computers.
The next two attachments are on.
The next two attachments.
Close your browser and open it again.
Oh, that's easy for you to
Don't
say.
worry, I've done it, yeah.
We did have trouble with that this morning, did it?
Yeah, let us get this work, because we don't want to overlook anything.
It's coming up on yours.
Thank you, Brett.
If anyone's still having trouble, I can loan my packet.
Well, I reviewed it before and everyone else's is open and I'll work on it while you're presenting.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to do anything. I guess I locked it up. I don't know. Yeah. I won't do anything. I don't want to do that.
Go ahead, Ms. Dedman.
Each party will need to be sworn, and they will have 5 minutes to open and up to 20 minutes to make their argument. We'll begin with the parent. The Kennedy family's here.
Okay, would everyone that's here for the Kennedy hearing, please stand, and that plans to give testimony, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You may proceed. Good morning, Ms. Kennedy. If
Good
you'll
morning.
identify yourself.
My name's Sierra Kennedy. I'm the mother of Trenton Kennedy. He attended kindergarten at Greenbrier last school year, and we moved mid-school year into the Guy School District. And we were denied by Guy to move back to Greenbrier, I guess. We moved to Greenbrier in 2013 so he could attend the Greenbrier School District. He's gone to a daycare there since 2013. He's 7 months old until now. They take him to and from school for us. I'm a full-time nursing student here in Little Rock. My husband works in Maumelle from 6 to 6. So we have no one to pick him up or take him to school, and we've just always relied on our daycare to do that. And they won't transport back and forth from Greenbrier to Guy for us. So I did put in for a district or the board-to-board transfer between Guy and Greenbrier. I've not heard anything back from Guy from that yet, and that was about 3 weeks ago. When I talked to the former superintendent of Guy, he told me that I could do it, but it would not be worth my time, but it would automatically be denied. So I went ahead and did it anyways, but I've not heard anything back from them yet. So that's where we are with that. I did try calling this morning. I don't know if they're just out of the office today or not, so I don't know where that is. But we would just like to be able to, at least this year, have him in Greenbrier, because I still have another year of school. We have no way to get him to school other than our daycare. So that's where we are.
Okay. You have anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Does
Thanks.
anyone have any questions before we hear from the school district? Okay, you may sit down.
Okay, thank you.
And is it the non-resident, or the one, okay, the non-resident district, okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Peggy O'Reilly from the Greenbrier School District. I'm Assistant Superintendent, and we would be happy to have any student that would be allowed to come to Greenbrier. He was denied based on the 3% max from Guy Perkins.
Thank you. And I will compliment you on how well y'all are doing with your RISE training and your reading. I appreciate all that effort. And when you come to this podium, if you will, please.
Good morning, Dr. Joe Fisher, Guy Perkins School District. First of all, to answer a couple of her questions, I have not seen a formal request for our board. We do meet next Tuesday, so we'd be glad to take that matter up. It has been a tradition that they do deny any transfers out because our numbers are now under 350. We are now being visited by the state, and we have to do a debt request with the state. So our numbers are below 350. We did follow the law We did cap our 3% back in March, according to Denny Acree, our secretary. And so we did send the district notice that this family would not be able to transfer out.
Did you have to deny others as well?
Yes, we did.
Does anybody have questions while he's at the podium? Dr. Moore?
How many, within that 3% cap, how many students transferred in and how many transferred out? Do you know?
I don't have that in front of me. I'm so sorry. It is my 11th day on the job, but I do know that we had
Congratulations.
12th day now. But in looking at the list in my mind, I know there are a number of others that were declined, and I do believe there were 5 that were in.
Thank you.
Yeah, if your number's below 350, 3% is not very many children.
It's 10 children.
Yeah, and did you have any coming in?
Yes, I do believe it was 5.
Okay, so-
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Chambers?
With the 350, does that create a new threshold? So once you hit 350, do you stop honoring even the 3% or not?
No.
No,
There's no connection between the 350 minimum enrollment and the 3%. They're two separate areas of the law.
the reference he possibly was making to the 350 is if you stay below 350 for, I think it's 2 years, you have to come before us. And so, that he wanted to be sure we understood that.
And it does affect financing.
Yes. Ms. Newton?
What did you say your enrollment was?
I do believe it will be 327 is what was on the third quarter for the state aid notice.
And how many kindergarten students do you have coming in?
We are still registering those, and I asked our secretary before I came up here, and she didn't have a solid number, so I can't give you those in
Okay,
and
so you
outs
don't
on
know if you're
6:30.
going to have one teacher's worth or a teacher and a half or two?
And I do
Okay, yeah,
apologize.
okay. Right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, you may sit down. Thank you. Does the board have questions of any of the other presenters or of Ms. Stedman?
If I may,
Mr.
Madam Chair,
Secretary?
just to say, so the third quarter average ADM for Guy Perkins in 18-19 is 332.55. That is the number that will be published later this year when we publish the list under the statute that requires, before January 1, we have to issue the list of all districts under 350. So 332.
Any more discussion? Questions?
I have a question of the family, just to clarify.
Yes,
So your son has been in,
if you'll come to the microphone.
your son was in kindergarten in Greenbrier School District? Is
Yes,
that
yes,
correct?
he's
And-
going into first grade.
Okay, and you all moved during the year?
Yes.
And you wish to retain him at the same elementary school or a
Yes,
different
or
elementary
just,
school?
yeah, we would like the same elementary school, but any Greenbrier District elementary school would work.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Discussion? Does anyone have a motion? Ms. Dean?
I move that we grant the waiver request.
I have a motion to grant the waiver request by Ms. Dean. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Chambers. Ms. Stedman?
I just want to address the motion really quickly. A proper motion will be to grant or deny the application, the request to move.
Okay, that's what I understood you to say. Well, I thought that's what you said. I'm sorry. I
To
knew what
grant-
you meant, so.
Grant the application. Grant the transfer, yes.
Okay. You got that, Tiffany? Okay. I have a motion and a second to grant the transfer. All in favor? Roll call.
Dr. Hill? Yes. Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. McFetrich? Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Dean?
Yes.
All yeas.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to add a comment to what Mr. Williamson said. This is such a difficult decision because the superintendents are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And I wanted to, it may seem hollow, but express appreciation for them doing the difficult work that they've been handed. And we so appreciate that and hope as we try to render specific decisions to specific families, you understand we're trying to support both sides of this equation. It's just hard to do, but thank you.
If y'all would like to be excused, feel free.
If I may,
Mr.
Ms. Zook,
Secretary?
I'll just say, because I think we've heard a couple of things today, and I know local boards have autonomy to do what they need to do. I do think that a blanket, and this isn't superintendents, okay, these are the boards, but just a blanket say, well, we don't grant board-to-board transfers. I'll just take this opportunity to say that I don't know if that is, I think that's not a good policy. And I just want y'all to know that's not something we advocate from the department. If we're going to live our vision and our mission of student-focused education, we know that not every district meets all the needs of the students, and this, because we've created these boundary lines, sometimes just saying no is not the right decision. And I know you guys know that, Dr. Fisher, Ms. Truxler, Greenbrier, I know, but y'all are in a tough spot, because you have boards that say this is our policy, this is our community. I get that. But I just think that is why the General Assembly vested this authority with this board. So I didn't want to leave this opportunity, at least publicly, to say I think that's the reason why you are given this opportunity to review these situations. And I know in the past there have been some concern that this board might overturn these denials based on the 3% cap, but I just want to say I trust when you all look at these packets, you all look at these situations, and you make those decisions based on the best interest of the students. And again, that's why we have the system we have, because local decision makers make those decisions based on what they know and the facts they have and their local considerations. We look at it from a broader perspective at the state. So just want to take the opportunity to say that before we move past this item.
And I agree to just batch a group of requests and not even really study them. You're not making student. It wouldn't say we're making batch decisions. We want to make student decisions. And I know those of you who are superintendents don't always have control over what your boards do. I get that. I live in a small town too. But we want to look at this thing, and we are not criticizing you in any way for doing the 3%. We get that. That was what it was given. But just boards say we're not going to do any legals. That closes too many doors for parents. Okay? Y'all may be just excused if you'd like to leave. The next family is the Lehman family. Ms. Dedman?
I'd like to check and see if Ms. Lehman's here. Brandy Lehman? Okay, Ms. Lehman has not appeared today. She was given notice and responded to the notice. She has not appeared. Do we have, is Superintendent Truxler here? Yes. Yes, sir. Would the board like to hear from Superintendent Truxler in this matter?
Yes.
Okay.
And she knew that she would be given an opportunity to speak, and she knew what time our meeting started.
Yes, ma'am. She did receive a notice letter. It is in your packet. This is a unique situation. What's happening in this appeal is you will find that there is no denial letter. Superintendent Truxler will explain to you that it is the district's contention that the application was presented late. There was a denial by the parent that the application was late. So for that reason, you'll find no denial letter.
You'll stand and raise your right hand.
Yes, ma'am.
You're already standing, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you may proceed.
Dennis Truxler, Superintendent, Quitman School District. The application was turned in late, according to my elementary secretary and elementary principal, 5/2/19 at 8:05. The dad brought it in, and he was informed that it was late. And it's my understanding the mom called back and told the elementary principal she had sent it in her first grader's backpack, and they failed to turn it in. It was still late. I did not take it to the board because on May 1st, at the end of the day, I gathered up the packet from my secretary of all those that were turned in. They were all approved. I would have proudly recommended to the board to approve Mrs. Lehman's application if it had been turned in on time.
Do you know if it was for all of her children or just one of her
It was for two children.
Two children.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
A little girl in the first grade will be going into second. Her son was in the sixth grade, who will be a seventh grader. Mhm.
And they were wanting to go to,
They had been in our district for a little over a year. They came from Guy Perkins, moved into our district 2 years ago, second semester. They were there all last year, and then they moved into the Heber Springs School District, I guess after school was out. And she was informed that she would need to turn in a freedom of choice when we found out that they were moving.
questions? Ms. Newton?
So these are students that were in your district last year?
Yes, ma'am. They've been there a little over a year. They enrolled, they moved from the Guy Perkins School District in the, what would it be, 17-18 school year, and enrolled in our district second semester. And so they were there close to a year and a half.
Do you know if the family has sought a board-to-board transfer?
I'm sorry.
Have they discussed a board-to-board transfer?
Ma'am, I have not talked to the mother. That was what I always tell folks if they want to come to our district and it's past the freedom of choice deadline, I do explain the board-to-board transfer to them.
That makes sense, because in her letter, it sounds like she's going to be moving back into the district. It's unclear, so maybe that's something that could.
That's what was stated in the letter, and again, I've not talked to the mother. I don't know what their situation is.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have a slightly different situation here. Does
I wish the
anybody
mother
have-
was here.
Ms. Newton?
I said, I wish the mother was here.
Yes. But if she was given notice and, you know, I don't know about her transfer, I don't know where her situation is, so. Anybody have any questions? Okay, sit down.
Thank you, ma'am.
Give everybody a minute to think about it and ponder it. Any discussion? Ms. Chambers?
But it feels like it's almost not I want to say not a real appeal, but I'm not sure exactly what our response is. I guess I would make a motion to deny this appeal.
I have a motion to deny from Ms. Chambers, a second from Ms. Dean. Any discussion?
No, when this decision is made, does a letter go out about board-to-board transfers or other avenues?
When the decision is made by the state board, I mail everyone a copy of the order, but I do not provide additional information about board-to-board transfers. I have been in I have been in contact with the parent, and I do have her contact information. I'm able to contact her.
But you have no idea why she's not chosen to come?
I'm not aware of any. I haven't seen any emails. I haven't had contact with her this morning. If we find that there was some extenuating circumstance, we do have an additional board meeting this month. We can consider whether she should be heard at that board meeting.
Okay. Have a motion on the floor to deny.
One quick question.
Ms. Newton?
If we vote to deny and then she comes back at the end of the month, would there be a possibility of
Or do we
changing
need to
what we
table?
did?
Lori Freno, Department of Education, you would have to rescind your vote.
So it would be possible.
I mean, you would have to rescind your vote and then re-vote in the next meeting.
Can you
But she-
table a choice?
Pardon me?
Can you table a choice request? I'm sorry. with all
I
these-
don't think there's a timeline on how soon after a request is filed, the state board has to hear the request. So, yes, it could be tabled.
Or we could take away the motion, or we have to do something. Right,
Yes, you have to act, yes.
okay?
Well, if we could rescind in July if she shows up. so.
Okay, okay.
Well, I would hate to make the superintendents come twice unless there was an extenuating circumstance,
Right,
I would think.
right.
I think my concern is that she could possibly be working and just could not take the time off. There are
Well,
a lot
she,
of-
I understand that,
Did we hear
Ms.
back from that?
Yes, I understand that, Ms. McFetrich. I guess, as Jennifer Dedman pointed out, she did receive notice. We did receive confirmation that she received notice. She knew this was going to be before the state board today. And oftentimes, as you know, we have people calling in, and I believe we've had people calling for school choice appeals as well.
So she knew that she had that option, do you think?
Well,
Did
she knew
She
that the
could call
board
in?
meeting was today, and there was no contact made by her to us. And we are very accommodating when folks, we're very accommodating not only in school choice matters, but in many matters when folks can't come, especially parents can't come in.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to deny. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Dr. Hill, the motion is to deny the appeal.
If you vote against it, if you want to not deny, and you vote for it if you want to deny.
And if folks vote down, I'm getting my double negatives here.
Here, get your microphone.
Sorry. So if we vote down this denial, it would allow the group to then decide if it wanted to table it into the meeting later in the month. Is that right?
No, if we have a motion to deny the transfer, if you vote to deny it, and then we were to later discover there was some reason, her car broke down, for example, some reason that she could not make it today, if you chose to hear it at the next board meeting, we could give notice and attempt to hear it at the next board meeting. All you'd have to do is rescind this vote. But without an extenuating circumstance, I think what Dr. Moore was saying was it would be difficult for the superintendents to come back.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Secretary.
Okay, so stay there because and we might need Lori because I gave my speech on purpose before the last one because those two situations were very different. And I think you had compelling, parent stories. Midland was the other direction from where the mom worked. The situation with Greenbrier and Guy Perkins, you had the same kind of deal. This one is quite different because the parent admits that before the fall semester they're going to be moving back. So, it's a little different situation. But my question, though, from a legal standpoint is what we're saying here is they're appealing the denial based on late submission.
That's correct.
Okay, so what is the board's, the board has flexibility on the 3%, making decisions based on best interests of the child. When it comes to a failure to submit for timely submission, what's the board's?
The board could choose to make a factual determination, a determination of fact as to whether the application was late. That's one option. The appeal is normally considered complete when we receive a denial letter, an application, and a letter for appeal. In this case, there was no denial letter, but there was a question of fact as to whether the application was timely. The district says the application was not received in time. The parent says that the application was received in time. There was a question of fact to be decided. For that reason, the appeal moved forward. The board could decide to make a determination of fact as to whether or not the application was late. If the application was late, there is no proper appeal. If the application was not late, then you would vote as to the merits.
Okay, so her application is dated 4/24/19. She said she put it in the backpack of her child,
For first grader.
her first grader.
Right.
Yes, well, there's that.
There's a difference.
And then it didn't get taken out and given to the superintendent. So the father brought it in the next day. The superintendent has got no problem with her coming. He denied it based on the fact that it was a day late.
Correct. Essentially, they just didn't accept the application. It wasn't a denial on the merits. The 4/24 that you're looking for is the date that Brandy Lehman signed the application. You can see it next to her signature.
Right.
The date at the top of the application is the district's indication of what time they received it.
Right. And since they seem willing, they would have no reason to date it a date differently than what they actually received it. They, the date is the date. So the question is, are we making a decision because the parent didn't appear, or are we looking at the denial based on the fact that the application was late? And, you have to think about, well, the date is May 1st. This one came in May 2nd for whatever reason. So if it had come in May 27th or 30th, are we going to be consistent about this, or are we,
The law does set a
because
deadline of May 1st.
we have no superintendent who's arguing, and there is opportunity for legal transfer, and he says in their district, they look at them as each student. So all of that into consideration, we have a motion on the floor to deny. And we're taking a roll call. Ms. McFetridge.
If the family moves back into this district in the fall, they would be allowed to come back to the district.
Correct. They'd be a resident of the district.
Yeah.
Ms. Dean? You?
So based on that, do we need a different motion?
It's up to you. One thing that you could do is make a factual determination as to whether the application was turned in late. Then you would be faced with the question of, is this an appeal at all? If this is not a proper appeal, it would not be decided on the merits, but rather that it was simply late.
Do you amend your motion, or are you sticking with your motion? So if you're saying deny, are you saying deny based on the application being late?
This is new information in terms of my initial motion. I'm not sure, even with what we've just talked about, the most appropriate next step, because there isn't actually a denial. Is that true? That this appeal is based on?
So the reason that I've not been quite so forthcoming, if the parent had appeared, the parent would have argued that the application was on time, or that was the argument that she made to me. The district has said that the application was received late. You can choose to make a decision as to whether the application was timely if you choose, and make a finding of fact that the application was late or on time if you choose. And then your denial would be based on the fact that it was not a complete appeal, the application was not turned in on time, and therefore the district did not consider it.
So we are making a decision strictly based on that because they will accept the student.
I'm sorry, could you say again?
we're discussing timeliness because the school will accept the student based off the information.
I'm not sure. We didn't reach that fact pattern. We've no idea if there was a 3% limitation, if there was some other consideration. Because did the school give testimony to that effect? I'm so sorry.
No, they didn't. They're just nodding behind you.
They're nodding. Okay. We didn't receive that in a denial letter. A denial letter would normally contain that information.
Heber Springs has not been involved in this because of the determination of untimely filing It never went to Heber Springs.
That is correct. This is
Okay.
the non-resident district that received this application late. Heber Springs did not receive this application from the non-resident district.
So just let me say, for the future, one of the changes we made to try to avoid situations like this is we went back in the statute to say that the parent has to file with both districts, the resident and non-resident district, moving forward. So for next school year, this kind of thing hopefully will be minimized because of that legislative change.
And that legislation doesn't take effect until July 24th, and then you have to write the rules and all of that. So that is for the 2021 school year.
Right.
That's correct.
Just curiosity, which time stamp will take precedent, the resident or the non-resident?
I would have to look at the new
Yeah,
act
we'll
to
have
double check that.
We'd have to look that up.
Okay.
But I'll.
Because that
I'll
would
get
be
back to
something
you.
parents would need to know, because they want to go to that one
Well,
first.
and that'll be part of the rules process and we'll bring that all to you
Okay.
to review, submit for public comment and all that. So we'll make a note to get that information and make sure that that's clear before the next school year.
All right, good, thank you.
Ms. Newton, I'll refresh my memory and get that to you.
And actually, it will be important to have that by January 1, because that's when parents will start applying for school choice for the 2021 school year.
There's a motion. Go ahead.
Well, right now,
Mr.
we
Secretary.
still have a motion
On the
to
floor.
deny. So either we'll vote that motion or an amended motion or a substitute motion that would be in order if you choose to.
I would note that, maybe Ms. Freno will give me a nod if she agrees. I would note that if you decide to go with a motion to deny it, essentially what you're deciding is that we have a complete appeal and that you're denying that appeal.
You have a what? Incomplete or a complete?
That you have a complete appeal, and that's what you're denying. The other option is the determination that it's untimely filed so that there's no appeal.
I think the finding of fact is, it is factual, based on the stamp, that these parents turned it in late, regardless of the circumstance that led to that. The superintendent didn't, quote, deny it, he just didn't hear it at all because it was turned in late. So we are deciding if that is a factual thing.
But the parents said it wasn't late.
Well,
That's,
the parent didn't deny that it wasn't handed to them late, they denied but what they
As
put it
Brent-
in the packet.
Right,
Right.
as Brent said, a
Right.
first grader.
And not being able to answer questions, so,
And so I guess, as you said, determination of facts. So it was there the day before, brought it home, realized it wasn't there, school was out. It was after the day, so they bring it in the next day, which was late.
yes, sir.
And I mean, and I think we're looking at extenuating circumstances that if we're trying to place the children in appropriate places, we're making a determination based on, and as Ms. McFisher said, we don't know why. Could the car wreck, something this morning, I mean, we don't know. And so,
we don't.
and then now, will we be able to hear this next month before school starts?
Well, we'll hear it on the, if the
This is
parent
July.
chooses to, we can
Right.
hear it July 30th when we have our special meeting,
Okay, all right, that's okay. If we do a deny.
if we do deny.
Okay,
But
that's good. I'm good.
I think the question is, we're denying the transfer because,
Because men look tardy.
but the superintendent of the receiving school didn't deny the transfer. He just said, you missed the date. So we have to decide, is that date, if it's the second a problem, or then later somebody comes in, well, I got mine in by the 13th, well, I got mine in, you know, so are we setting a precedent that we look at things based on the date and the intentions? Is that, am I on target?
Yes, Ms. Zook, sorry, Jennifer, I didn't mean to steal your microphone. I mean, that was my concern, is first, the law does not provide for an exception to the filing deadlines. Law does not allow that. And second, if you allow an exception, that does set a precedent.
Right.
And I'll turn it back over to Jennifer, who's handling this very competently. I just wanted to make
right.
sure.
So what we might want to consider is, this superintendent said that his board doesn't batch legal transfers. They look at them individually. That parent has that option. Assuming the Heber Springs people, who at this point are oblivious to anything that's going on. So I think that's why we have to see how we want to word our motion. Do we vote on this motion to deny, or do we withdraw this motion?
I think we need clarification of, my wording, however simple, was just to deny this appeal. But maybe that's insufficient for what we're talking about. Is there more explicit wording that should be part of this motion?
I'm understanding you saying that you would like to deny the appeal outright rather than to deny a transfer from a proper appeal. Is that what you're trying to express?
What's the difference between the two?
Let me throw something. I think
Mr. Secretary.
to simplify it, to say deny based on untimely filed,
Okay.
based on it being untimely filed, would take care of the concern of that May 2nd.
And then if the parent came, they would have the choice between trying for a legal transfer or trying to argue that they did get it in on time, it just didn't get to the secretary, you know. So given the parents, they'll have a choice.
That makes perfect sense. Can I have my motion reflect that? I'm denying the timeliness of the,
So I'm hearing your motion to be denied based on the application being untimely filed.
yes.
And will you second that, Ms. Deeb?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to deny the request based on the, on missing the deadline. Everybody clear?
Got it.
Okay, roll call.
Dr. Hill.
Yes to deny.
Mr. Williamson.
Yes.
You almost got a doctorate there. Ms. Chambers.
Yes.
Ms. McFetridge.
Yes.
Dr. Moore.
Yes.
Ms. Newton.
Yes.
Ms. Dean.
Yes.
7 yeas.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay. Is everybody good? Do we need a break? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Dedman. You're excused. You did a really good job with these. Okay, now we move to away from our action agenda to our reports agenda. And, excuse me? Oh, yes, we will pause because Ms. Hill needs to gather her stuff, and so that'll be good. Thanks. So let's take 6 minutes.
Early childhood coach called me yesterday, questions you might ask me. We don't do that. It's a if there is a no, they had minutes. So I went there, Sarah had a question, and then
No, I mean, when they came in,
well, separate entities. Early childhood is different than but this is what they do in terms of the training. It's federally required. So she mentions they look at the last curriculum and will implement them. They actually don't do that on the paper. Yes, but I saw it on my tree.
Call the meeting back to order. First thing is chair's report. I have nothing in particular. I'm going to enjoy working with this board another year. I appreciate all the hard work they do. The cases, as you can see, we try to deliberate and think and make sure we make it a student-focused, even if we sometimes look like we're bending the rules, but nonetheless, the rules are made to be broken when it comes to children. Commissioner? Actually, it should say Secretary's report. Is that not right?
Well, I'm in both roles, so it's okay, and it'll take a while to get everyone used to the transition. So I have a few things for you today. First, celebrating a couple of our students in Arkansas. Each year, Prudential they have a program that's the Spirit of Community, and they honor students all over the nation. And our two students that were honored from Arkansas were Anna Claire Hay, and she's a sophomore at Shiloh Christian, and Tacey Humphrey, who is at Highland Middle School. And this is a program that honors volunteerism. Anna Claire started a Teens with Integrity program, and it's to help young people find volunteer opportunities they are passionate about. And it started when she was 11, and her grandmother had Alzheimer's disease, and so she wanted to get her classmates involved in visiting the nursing home, capturing the stories of the elderly. But what she found out was that not all of her friends shared the same passion about that particular thing that she did. So instead, she created this to encourage teens to get involved in things that they do have passion for. So she was honored for that. And Tacey was, as a sixth grader, became a tutor for a student in her class, and the student was visually impaired. And she came up with ways, tactile ways, to help this student learn. And Ms. Newton, you will appreciate this. She came up with ways to turn visual concepts such as grids and tables into something that didn't require sight. She decided to use Play-Doh to create these that the young man could actually feel and sense. And now she said he figures his ratios just like the rest of us. So I wanted to report on that, and I have sent notes of congratulations to both of those students. The second thing I want to talk about, and I will pass these out to you. Last month, Hope Worsham attended a conference that several states were presenting, and Florida was one of those states. And if you pay attention to the education press, education media, often you see Florida cited as a state who has done a good job with reading. And this chart that they presented at this conference shows that it wasn't an overnight success. They actually, their journey began in 2001 when then Governor Bush signed an executive order creating something very similar to our Rise Arkansas initiative. So as you see here, it has taken them over a decade, nearly 2 decades, to see a 10-point increase in their NAEP reading assessment scores from the early 2000s until their most recent administration on both the 4th grade and the 9th grade level. And as you look in that chart, you can see even their state assessment that has changed. They're now on their 3rd state assessment since 2001. Each time you see there was a dip because obviously as states move forward with assessments, we try to raise the bar. So point being, their process wasn't a straight, upward slope year by year. Over the trend over all of the years is that they were moving up. So I bring you this to kind of talk about Arkansas and how, remembering, when the ACT Aspire results came out earlier this month, there was obviously concern of how fast we are moving. We'll just point out that because we started with K2 with RISE, there are very few, if any, students that have taken the ACT Aspire that actually have gotten the full benefit, I say the full benefit of the RISE work and the science of reading work that we're doing. So growth does take time, as I said in my comments in the press release. And other states are seeing that. Florida is a good example. That's not to say we are diminishing any of the work or we are pulling back on any of it. We use each data point that we get to help us understand what can we do better, how can we get more aggressive, or what are the gaps that we have. And we identify those gaps, especially in the RISE. We've identified gaps with the work we've done in the past with math, which is why we've restructured internally to provide better support. That's why we have restructured some of our external supports through our math and science specialists out around the state. So not really a state of the state of education report, but it is just something that as you as board members are interacting with members of the community, you get questions about test results, things like that. This provides some context. We have a lot of folks working really hard, a lot of them sitting here in this room, but in classrooms all over, and probably this week in PD sessions all over, where if you watch our social media, you see, again, we are hitting RISE Arkansas as hard as we can, and we'll keep doing that. Our focus on reading is not going to diminish in any way. But when folks say, hey, Arkansas is not moving very fast, you can show them, hey, one of the states that are highlighted as being a fast mover, it's taken them 18 years to get to where they are now and show those improvements. So happy to have any discussion or take any questions about that. And I know Stacy's here too, and if you have any specific questions about curriculum side of things and what we're doing to support our districts, I'd be glad to answer those.
Yes, and
Dr. Moore?
yes, I really appreciate all the hard work the department's done in training teachers in school districts. I don't know if y'all could answer, one of you, how many districts have undergone RISE training? And when do we expect to have a complete map, since I know it's not forced at this point?
That's a really hard question to answer, okay, because you're asking about specific districts.
Introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. Stacy Smith, Assistant Commissioner. We have over 7,000 teachers that either gone through training or are in place of doing training right now, okay? We keep our cohorts for K2 RISE at 25 teachers in a cohort. And so what you'll see is we'll have multiple districts in a cohort. So you might have you know, it's maybe not it won't be the entire district. So when we first started the RISE trainings, only K2 teachers could get in. And so you wouldn't necessarily say that an elementary school was completely trained because their 3-6 teachers had not been trained yet. So first year we had K2, second year we created 3-6. And so this is the third summer that we're actually in training. We have, goodness gracious, I want to say 100 and, Kim, do you remember the number of trainers that we had in that report I sent you? Okay. We have been building capacity to become a trainer in RISE. We have very high standards for that. We require them to go through the standalone letters training foundational model, which is 8 days. They have to go through the first one, then they have to go through a TOT. They have to pass an assessment. Then they have to go through our RISE training days. After they've gone through all those RISE training days to be a trainer, the first year that they're a trainer, they're not allowed to train without an ADE person there watching them and signing off that they've met the expectations for K2. And so trying to get the fidelity of what the K2 RISE Academy was important. And so building the capacity of the number of trainers took some time. And so in this last year, did you find it yet, Kim? Okay, so more than 300 RISE Academy trainers. Some of those are 3-6 and some of those are K2. The K2 we've held much tighter than we did the 3-6, but there's some hand-in-hand components there. So over 7,000 teachers. But the legislation for the science of reading requires that all teachers, K6, have to demonstrate. Did you have a question?
I don't want to
We'll
interrupt
come back
your
to the
thought.
numbers. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So K6 teachers by the year 21-22 have to demonstrate proficiency in the science of reading. And so there are multiple pathways beyond just RISE that teachers can do to demonstrate the proficiency in science of reading. There's more than just RISE Academy.
I think the number we're looking at.
13,000 teachers. Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
13, yeah, not 7,000. 13,000 teachers are currently trained or being trained.
So if we have 45,000 about teachers in the state, that's about, and half of those we assume are elementary and half, I know, randomly. So we have about half of the teachers trained that we want to get trained.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But there are multiple pathways again.
Right.
So not only, so we've had, and those pathways had to be submitted to the department.
Right.
They were reviewed by department staff, and then we approved different pathways.
Okay.
So there are other manners.
And because we are data-driven now, thanks to the that part of the department, will we be looking specifically at if there's difference between the teachers who have the training and the way their students perform in achievement or growth versus those who are not trained or those who are in process? Do we have a way of doing that?
So one of the things we did with the K2 RISE is we partnered with Middle State Tennessee with Dr. Timothy Odegaard, and he's doing a research study on RISE academies and the efficacy. So he does a survey with teachers when they come into the academy and determines what their knowledge was, and then does a survey at the end of the academy, what they acquired, and then we follow their students' test scores over time. And so they've got an efficacy study going on about specific to RISE.
Okay. And then at some point, that will be available?
Yes, and then like when the test scores came in recently, I know that Sandy Shepard, who is our lead RISE specialist, has been working with Hope on identifying the schools that we feel like most of the faculty has been trained to kind of start seeing if we can see any shifts. But of course, the emphasis started with K2,
Right.
and we've just now gotten to 3-6. And it's kind of like putting everybody on a diet at the same time in a building, okay? Some people take to it really well. They cut their carbs, they start exercising, you know, and then some people, when they get under stress, they revert back to what they know.
Right.
And what feels comfortable. And so right now, getting people focused, not only getting them trained, getting the right materials and resources in their classrooms, planning the curriculum. It's so much bigger than sitting in 6 days of training.
Right.
It's sitting in 6 days of training is the tip to get you curious about learning more, get your school district on the right road to getting you the support you need, and then that coaching in the classroom for when you get stuck.
Yeah. And I think if we can emphasize, like to our superintendents, those in AAEA and those not, that if you get your principals trained and your teachers and the implementation is with fidelity, that you're going to get the reward. But they also need to think in terms of, if you have a teacher who's trained but you have not adopted a curriculum, so they're constantly having to adapt the curriculum to the new way they're wanting to teach, it might be wise of you to consider going ahead, even if it's not your, quote, adoption year, to go ahead and jump on that. I won't name the district, but I know of one district that the person in charge of the literacy went to the superintendent and said, we need to change curriculum because this, and he said, well, you know, give it to me. And then he said, well, you know, it's just, we just can't afford it. And she said, we can't afford not to. And that district did it, and now they jumped 35 points this year. So that's good testimony in my mind. And so I think that the administrators who get to make the decisions about curriculum and the ones who send principals versus those who don't to the training, they've got to realize it's a whole thing. It's not just send the kindergarten teacher.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things we did with the Science of Reading Pathways portion is they have to have a phase 1 and a phase 2. And phase 2 is the actual demonstration part. And one of the ways to demonstrate is being observed by an assessor. And we are in the process of training principals to be the assessors. And so for a principal to be an assessor, and this is what most districts are doing, their principal then has to attend the RISE academies with their teachers. And then those principals go back to a training that's only principals and get trained on the look-fors, and they're working with other principals. And that's actually going on right now, and it's going very, very well and getting really good feedback from that. So you're right, the leadership has to have it. We also had that recent legislation that requires the department to review materials, supplies, and resources aligned to the science of reading and to put out a list before next school year. So we have lots of districts right now calling the department saying, is this product going to be on the list? And so we are trying to get a process in order to be able to start reviewing materials, kind of outlining our rules right now. That'll be coming to the state board soon. So we have a lot of work to do over the next few months.
Have questions? Ms. Newton?
A couple of questions. One on the, you mentioned that you had like over 300 trainers already ready to go. Are you going to make that list available to districts? So, because I know some of them are looking for places to send teachers, and it's not always easy to find places that has slots available. So are you going to make that list if a district wanted to bring a trainer into their own district, into their own building?
So, yes, we can make the list available. Can I elaborate a little bit more? Most of our trainers are at the educational cooperatives.
Right.
So that's where we started. Then we looked at the largest school districts in the state, and we reached out to them personally and said, hey, it'd be in your best interest to have a trainer. And so in the first years, we actually offered to large districts. And the very first year, we had some very large districts turn us down. Mm-hmm. And then we had some very large districts who said, sure, we'll jump on this with you. And we actually paid them to send their people to come become a RISE trainer. This last year, we charged districts for them to send their folks to become RISE trainers. So we are about to put on another TOT for people to become RISE trainers that will be open to districts to be able to send people. But most of our very large districts in the state, not even, we medium-sized districts, have their own trainers. And then the co-ops have at least 2 to 3 trainers at each of the educational cooperatives. So we've pretty well throughout the state now, but there's still a waiting list in some areas of the state. We do have some co-ops who did not have their region completely full, and we made partnerships with others to do that. But to be able to put out a list would be a great idea. One thing we did not want to happen, and we saw this happen before with a previous professional development, we invested a lot of money in getting people trained, and then these individuals went out and charged became a very lucrative business, charging to provide PD for districts, and they were going out and making a pretty good sum to going out and doing PD because a district would hire them to come in and do the training. And we don't want that to necessarily happen with this. And so when we go through the training, we basically say your training is provided for free. Now, if you have a smaller district, and we have some cases in which we had some smaller districts who need some really intensive training, and we are actually connecting the partnerships between. In fact, I've got a district that's more central that I'm connecting with a Northwest district who has many trainers that I feel like the state has invested in this large district because they took the opportunity to get trainers. We're trying to work with them to create a partnership where some of their people can come down and help do some of the supportive training in areas where we don't have as many trainers. So we're trying to make those connections.
Okay.
And I do also, I'm sorry, I'm probably going to way too long. We also have regional RISE specialists that are ADE affiliated that cover regions, and their job is to work in those regions, to check on those schools, to check on the trainers who are trainers in those regions to make sure things are going well. And when we get a call or when we get told this training was terrible, this people are Commissioner Key was with me one day when we were walking down the sidewalk, and I got a call, and he said, "Oh, they're in trouble." And they were. By the next day, I had an ADE person there taking over the presentation. The day after that, we were sitting down with co-op directors and co-op leaders to talk about how this is supposed to be presented, what you're supposed to be doing. I've gone in and met with superintendents who were not following up and coaching with their folks to say we're serious about this. And so we're trying to hold it tight. The thing that's so challenging is it's growing so fast, and to keep it tight and ensure fidelity is really difficult. And we have cases out there where we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. My other question was on the assessor that you mentioned you were concentrating on principals. And my question is, around the state, in districts, we have a lot of K-12 literacy specialists that are there to help teachers implement. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on making sure that those literacy specialists were getting the assessors training, because we want it, just like you were saying, implemented correctly in the classrooms and making sure it's done. And sometimes teachers will be more receptive to help from a coordinator than they would a principal that's there to evaluate their performance. And so giving them what do I look for, how do I know it's being implemented, giving them that training. Are you doing that also?
So the literacy specialists in the state also have to show proficiency in the science of reading now, because that was new legislation, and going through the training. The training that they get for being a TOT for RISE is much more in depth than what the principals get. The principals, we're breaking it down for the principals because they don't have the background. And we actually break it down for the principals where they're relying on those literacy specialists to help them identify the look-fors. So I think we probably could do a better job making sure those folks know what we're telling the principals to look for. And so we probably need to make that connection. But what we're really trying to do is we're not trying to make the principal the literacy expert. We're trying to make the principal be the person who can recognize that the teacher's doing what she's supposed to be doing, that they're purchasing, and they know who to go to get help or ask to get for, are the materials we're purchasing aligned?
Yeah.
And we've actually literally put up the difference between a word wall and a sound wall. So when a principal walks into a classroom in this training, we're saying, okay, if this is what you're seeing, this is not aligned to the science of reading, and this is why. Here's a picture of the sound wall. If you walk into a classroom, now they may not know how to teach the difference between the sound wall and the word wall, okay? But that's a visual thing to let them know, okay, we're probably on the right track.
Well, I know a lot of the literacy specialists have not been trained in the past to you know, it's completely different with the science of reading. And so I think any training that they could get on this is what I look for, and I think it would be a benefit
It's
to
a great suggestion.
especially ones that have been there for a while.
Great suggestion. We'll make sure and try to pair that up. Great suggestion.
Anyone else on this side? Over here? Oh, yes, Dr. Hill?
Yeah, and I want to follow up on Commissioner's point and a couple of things, just particularly LRSD, as we've been working through some challenges. From a standpoint of kind of like I'm a coach, and so when we're assessing where our deficiencies are and where we may need what I'm calling academic red shirt to kind of catch up because we're behind, just as ways that we consider, as my visits out, the regular day of activities are to keep learning continuing, but in some instances we are so far behind there's no remediation process to take place to strengthen those that are weak, and we have to be intentional if we're going to get caught up in this process, to have those after-school reading programs, the summer intensive reading programs, as I look down here, all those things, because we're not going to catch up in a normal day. And so those are the intensive, decisive, after-school reading. I mean, just like what we're saying, we know that a lot of kids don't get to eat, so we feed them, all right? And then we know that they're going home and nobody's reading to them, just how we start feeding. So we're going to have to approach this from a very intensive wraparound from this literacy program, as you mentioned, to be able to do that. And that's why I appreciate you doing that, because when I looked down here and I saw first, third grade summer reading camps for level 1 student in 2003 to get there, that was part of the process for 2019. So that's an intensive. So if we go to a school and we visit and they're not reading at a certain level and they're not in summer school, they'll never probably catch up. And if they're not going to after school reading to catch up, and other kids or students are moving ahead and they're not in the weight room strengthening their reading, they'll always be behind and always be deficient and always be weak. So the intentionality that we must take place are for those groups that are deficient, and they won't get caught up in the normal day, you know. And so we must have specific, and that's why I like you giving this visual to say, okay, if I go by a school and that student's not reading well, and we know that they play ball all summer and do well, but then when school comes again in the fall, if they haven't had any literacy, we know that they're not going to be where they need to be. And I've seen that happen in instances. So, you know, I can't emphasize the remediation reading programs for those who are deficient must be at the forefront of us catching the bottom up to move them forward. And so I appreciate you identifying this and having those accountable measures there to make sure those that are behind have an opportunity to get caught up, because those that are caught up, we need to continue to be moving them forward so that we can continue to improve education holistically in our state. So I appreciate that, but I just hope that we have those specific programming for those kids that are behind. And we know based off those schools, there are a lot of them.
So let me give you two things that we're working on very specifically on that. And one stems from legislation that came out of the 2019 session, where if a district that has 50% of their students that are below grade level in reading, then we are required to offer them level 4 support. Remember the levels of support under Act 930? That's directed support. So we work directly with them, telling them, analyzing their situation, and moving how they changing how they spend their NSL dollars, very specifically in that. So the categorical dollars, we have a chance to help shape what those types of programs to catch those kids up. Because if you have 50% or more of your kids that are below grade level in reading, those are the areas you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
Then 40%, if you're 40% like between 40 and 50, then it's level 3 support. So that's kind of that, you know, you're not, well, it is a crisis, but it's not as severe as those that are 50% or greater. How many districts have we identified that are?
There's around 80.
80, okay, that's what I was thinking. So we're talking about 80 districts where our teams, Dr. Hernandez, Ms. Kaufman, Ms. Smith, their teams are going to be working directly with those schools to create those types of interventions. The second thing I want to talk about is, and this is actually showing results now, so Stacy's team, just commend them for this. We had remedial reading classes that have been on the books for a number of years, but they could not count as credit. The only thing you could count as credit was English 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, when you got into high school. But what they've done is created, I think you all made it for credit when you approved the high school, the courses, academic reading, critical reading, and and strategic reading. Okay, so focused on middle school and high school. So those are reading classes now that at high school, those students can get credit as electives, right? For those, so they take those in addition to their English 1, English 2, English 3, English 4. Clarendon, we know they were one of the early adopters of this. Last year was the first year, correct me if I miss anything, Stacy, but last year was the first year that schools could actually use those and use them for credit. Clarendon used it. If you look at their reading results, just the raw results that we got, they made significant gains at the upper levels. So we're not just looking at K2 and 3-6. We are looking for ways to help those students that are in the pipeline that didn't get the benefit of RISE but still need that boost to get them caught up, Dr. Hill. So very proud of the work that's going on there. There are other districts that have done it too. Clarendon's just the one that I focused on because I talked to their principal earlier this year. He told me what they were doing, and the results are bearing out.
It's also a way for students who are identified as dyslexic to be getting intensive intervention during the school day in a course for an elective credit. So you can focus on reading. Before, it was always this idea if it was considered any type of remedial course, you couldn't get a credit for it. Well, I think I'd rather have you be in an intensive reading class for credit than necessarily taking some other elective that may or may not be life-altering for you. So.
And I know there are, I'm aware of some that are on block schedule, and the teachers are getting training on the science of reading and adapting curriculum, and they're using 30 minutes of their 90-minute block to work with the kids on reading. If you're dyslexic, fine. If you're not, you know, whatever you need if you're behind. And then the rest of the hour on English. So it's almost like embedding, but they don't have to come to us to do that. But the kids are getting the intervention and the RTI, those kinds of things. So thank you, Ms. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? I saw that our newest board newest board member just came in, Mr. Pickering. If you come, we'd welcome you up here. I introduced who you were and what you did yesterday, but this is Chad Pickering. Am I pronouncing it correct? Pickron. Okay, Pickron. If I miss it, you keep correcting me. He's an attorney. He lives in Bryant. He has 5 children. And we welcome you to the board, and we value your input. We know it's a steep learning curve, but we know that you're capable and you'll do your homework.
Thank you. Last item, Madam Chair, on my report, just a quick update on the ADE Summit. We had nearly 2,400 attend our summit, and so we were very pleased with the numbers for that being the first time we'd ever had one. And as I mentioned, I think in telling what we were going to do, we did have speakers and presentations that were aligned to our current initiatives. For example, RISE our PLC for Arkansas project, high reliability schools, and we wanted to focus on having an opportunity for school teams to present and highlight the positive work that they were doing within these initiatives. We also had national experts. We heard from some of our educators that said they were really amazed at the level and the number of national experts that we were able to get on a variety of topics to be there for that week in Hot Springs. And I think another very important component of this was how well it reaffirmed the partnership between now the Division of Elementary and Secondary Education and Arkansas ASCD, which is an organization that had their own conference for many years, and we worked with them to have this conference, and they were a great partner with it. And we will be debriefing next week. We did have feedback, a feedback mechanism, so we could capture the feedback from all of the sessions, from the keynotes, and in general about the conference. And we'll be debriefing and reviewing those starting next week to analyze and prepare for the 2020 summit. And again, we'll send out the dates so you can save those dates, put it on your calendar. We would love to see our board members there for a day or as many days as you could be.
And I do appreciate, again, the fact that the summit is held when it's not school time, so we're not taking teachers that are looking to improve themselves out of the classroom when the students need them. And I do appreciate also the fact that it was, some of the sessions were live streamed for those of us who couldn't make it over to Hot Springs. Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, next item is the standing committee and the special committees, the liaisons. And I will mention this, we have been discussing the fact that each time the chair changes, these kinds of things will change. So we will continue to try to keep the public and ourselves updated on what's going on in the different sections of the department, but we won't have this exact same format or protocol. So just want to be sure the public knew when it changes that we think that's better, because we want to keep people informed, but we don't want to add things or be redundant. Okay, first, Ms. Dean, do you have anything this month on family engagement and learning?
Just briefly, just to refer back to the summit, our team had an opportunity to present there as well, and they did a very good job, Kim and Chelsea. And so I'll be bringing back some more information next month.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Newton on ESSA?
No new information other than you saw the preliminary release of data.
Okay. And on public school accountability, Ms. Kaufman, would you come to the microphone, please?
Deborah Kaufman, Assistant Commissioner.
What I want her to talk about is the, if you're not already on or don't receive the commissioner's memos that come out every night about 10 minutes till 7, and the way you can access those. So if you're not on the list to get them, do get on the list, because they're very informative. They have a link, and she'll tell you about that.
So if you're on the red bar, of course, if you're at arkansahed.gov, our website, and on the red bar under About, the fourth item down is Commissioner Memos. If you click there and you open it up, you can see all of the memos that currently are posted for the fiscal year 1920. So it's a very short list right now. It automatically rolls over July 1st. But at the very top, you can go back and look at previous years by just dropping down those boxes. If you're just searching for something, you may want to go to the very bottom of that list. Dan, if you'll open that back up, where it says all fiscal years, so it searches widely if you're looking for something that may have been put out some time ago. But today, Ms. Zook wanted me to really make sure that all of our board members and our listening audience knows that in that red bar is the opportunity to subscribe to that daily email. And you click on subscription, you go right in, fill out this information, and then click the subscribe button, and that will automatically put you in the queue to receive those emails every afternoon. Those emails are very well organized, and they tell you every memo that has been approved, or if a memo has been revised, it automatically gives you the link to that memo. So every day I look at it. I'm sure everyone else that receives that memo, we look at it. If it's something that you need to know more about, if the title didn't tell you enough, or if it's something, I want to see all of that, it's a very quick click onto the hyperlink, and you can go directly to that memo and see the full memo and any attachments. So today, is a part of our public school accountability report, Dan, if you'll take us back to Commissioner's memo. The reason we wanted to really bring it up is if you look at that very top memo that we released this morning, is the public school accountability timeline for planning. We do reserve the right to change a date if we have to, but it helps our school districts to know in advance, hey, here are all the dates that anything related to accountability is going to happen, and we can kind of plan accordingly. And so things are hyperlinked in there, but it's pretty self-explanatory of what's going on. Also, on the Commissioner Memo page, if you go down to the fourth item, you'll see that we have posted proposed monitoring tools for federal and state. Every year, we update our state and federal monitoring tools based on the feedback that we got from the school districts. How do we make this easier to understand, easier to follow? So we have posted those documents. We put that out as a courtesy to the state, ask any stakeholder to provide feedback to us, and then the final documents will be posted later in the month once we've received feedback from the stakeholders.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Okay. Next, Ms. Newton, we have NASB.
No new information.
Okay. And then on special education, the special ed unit is providing, or will be providing, training in the Little Rock School District for district principals, district assistant principals, and the different leadership positions on the IDEA requirements for disciplinary action involving students receiving special education. So we're, once again, the department is doing everything they can to help every district, and especially like Little Rock School District, which is in level 5. They will provide a keynote address in Forest City. They will be presenting information regarding new alternative pathways to graduation at 13 different educational co-ops. And they will be providing training at the University of Little Rock for education interpreters. There's new guidelines for people who do sign language, those kinds of things. And then the monitoring and program effectiveness team and the dispute resolution team together will be presenting on the process of writing present level of academic achievement and functional performance in the 10 of the educational co-ops. The dispute resolution is used by parents or districts when in their conferences they cannot come to agreement. Then they both have the right to appeal what is going on there, the dispute, and then objective third party comes in and they have a hearing, and then it can go on from there. And the effort is to make sure that the child does not get lost in the process of the adults working and making decisions, and also to try to resolve, if at all possible, so that we don't get involved with the courts, but we handle it with objective people. And these hearing officers are trained to conduct those hearings. Okay, next is, that's it. Do we have any new business? Do we have public comment? Anyone signed up, Ms. Farino? No public comment?
Well,
Mr.
I did just get a text. I think
Okay.
there is someone here that would like to offer public comment.
Okay.
Mr. Ramey, and it's
You can have it.
it's relevant to the topics we had before on school choice appeals. His is a little different situation, but he just asked if it would be appropriate. And so if y'all vote to allow public comment, Mr. Ramey is here to talk about it.
Okay, I think the question I have is, when public comment is on our agenda, do we vote for that too, or do we just have to vote?
I'm sorry, we're not done. We still have.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry, we were premature. We've got another.
We are
agenda.
premature, but I think since he's here and we've asked for that, I'm going to go out of order and let the public comment so we won't tie him up if he has other things he needs to be doing, if that's okay with the rest of the board. Okay?
That's fine to do that, Ms. Zook, and the board would have to vote, by majority vote, to accept public comments.
Even though it's on the agenda.
Was he was not on the agenda,
No, I
was he?
meant the words public comment were on the agenda.
No, if
Okay.
he did not, he can, folks can sign up for public comment at a period of time prior to the board meeting.
Right.
In which case, the board does not have to vote on
Okay.
whether or not they will accept public comment.
Okay.
But if someone comes and signs up, as Mr. Rainey did today, there would just have to be a majority vote to hear public comment, and then he would have up to 3 minutes with, discretion of the
Okay.
chair, of course,
All
to
right.
extend.
Thank you. I appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, do I have a motion to accept public comment?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Dean, seconded by Ms. McFettridge. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, now then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I obviously wasn't prepared for this meeting today.
Pull the microphone up just a little and state your name.
Came straight from work, so I apologize for my work clothes. And so I'll be very brief in my comments, but I guess I'm a father and a citizen and in a situation, and I'll just disclose that to you. So I live in Maumelle and in the Pulaski County Special School District, and our children have attended private school all of their life. Those are the choices that we made. My daughter came to me with an impassioned plea at the end of this school year and wants to participate in the public school system, and made a very diplomatic and articulate case to do that. And so we've kind of rethought the proposition of private public schools and want to help her do that. Not familiar with a lot of the deadlines and various things that are a part of education. We missed the school choice. To be honest, I'd never thought about school choice. And so I began to learn this process, having not ever really had to. And so to be clear, I've got a student in a private school setting who's never attended a public school wishing to join a public school out of district, okay? But to do that, it became apparent that I have to be released from the current district that I am in, even though she has never nor intends to participate in a school in that district. And so in this particular instance, Pulaski County, they had a mechanism which was called a legal transfer request. And I guess I did what kind of any diligent person would do, is I learned about the process, I asked questions, and I guess I would characterize it as I made myself available to answer any questions or have discussion, because it is like each student has their own situation and their own story. And so I did everything that I could to prepare for that. And at the recent board meeting, those legal transfer requests were voted upon, even to the extent I attended the meeting, introduced myself to the superintendent to let him know that I was available for any discussion about the matter, particularly about the nuance of a student who lives in a district but has never attended a school in that district. That was presented to the board, and without any discussion and with recommendation from the superintendent, all of the legal transfer requests were denied, including my daughter's. And to be honest, as I hung around and inquired about that, was discouraged from interacting with the board members. And of course, I was probably a little less professional in trying to figure out really what to do as a parent of a child seeking to enter the public school system, basically asked to leave. And so I understand that I missed that school choice deadline. However, in a scenario where you have a student, so it's my specific case, but I think it's a broader question, where you have a student who has participated in the private school setting, now wishing to enter the public school setting, it just seems to me that there are some unreasonable barriers to do that. I guess I will finish my comments by saying it seems like in this case, policy and the interests of the school district far, far, far outweighed what I think is the most important thing, and that is the children's desire to go to school. And if at that, remove herself from the private school setting and enter the public school setting. And so I guess I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If there's any reprieve or any further discussion that could be had, I'm certainly, as a parent, as a citizen, I'm more than open to that. And to be clear, to learn the process, I did contact Commissioner Key just to understand the process, and that was the nature of our communications. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, you weren't here earlier today, so at the expense of the listening public and going again, I wish the Secretary would go over what he went about boards doing batch denials as opposed to individual student consideration.
Yes, thank you. And just not to say it as long as I took the last time, but just the concern that Mr. Rainey's bringing up is just another example of that concern, that boards have blanket policies that although they consider, the reality is those boards say, well, we're going to reject all of these. So I did not know about your situation. I did get communication from another parent who's it's a similar situation, but their student has been homeschooled their entire life, school career, wanted to enter at Central High to start high school there, and again, I guess in that same meeting had that denial issued. So that's why I just encourage districts to think differently about that and look at individual basis cases, because blanket denials don't take into account individual needs of students and families.
Appreciate the comments. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, appreciate y'all.
And thanks for being a good advocate for your child. And you will find this board is very individual student focused.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, now then, back to item number 4, and I apologize for overlooking that before. The state required assessment results, which we certainly don't want to skip that or fail to give Ms. Worsham another chance while she's still here at the department.
Yeah, and since she only has a week left, I expect you guys to grill her, okay? Don't hold back. Just give her all you got, all right? I do want to take a second, though, and kind of fill you in on how efficient and effective the Arkansas Department of Education Assessment Unit really is. Because what I like to think about is this last year we gave a total of 745,000 tests. If you broke down the individual ACT Aspire test, it was actually 1.4 million assessments, with over 98% of those assessments online. The actual ACT in 11th grade, we had 31,568 students that we provided a free ACT to in 11th grade, paper and online. That's amazing. What a gift our state gives to high schools and to juniors and to families. And the more that families can learn about that and that opportunity, and it takes time. The actual ACT Aspire, over 300,000 assessments, or students that took that assessment online. Amazing. K2 assessment, We were an innovative state who broke out and actually gave districts choice, and those ideas came from the assessment unit. Our districts had the choice between 3 different K-2 assessments, and they are also online. And if you remember when we first went there, everybody was concerned about it, right? Are you hearing anything about it? It's because it's going well. And districts have choice. And this next year, we've got procurement just opened, it just closed. We're adding a 4th to that list. We had 2 more vendors apply, and so we'll be reviewing those, and districts will have a choice of a 4th one in this coming year. ELPA 21, which is for our students who speak a second language, we had over 38 students take that assessment. DLM, which you heard about this week, over 4,000. We have NAEP going on in our state, okay? We had over 264 Arkansas schools who participated in the different various NAEP assessments. And of course, we have our civics assessment. Remember when that legislation passed and everyone was concerned about that assessment? Again, I think we were innovative. We put it online. We did it in a digital platform where we had learning included within it. We had over 58,000 students complete the civics assessment this last year. The assessment unit right here, you guys stand up. I just want. You don't get many complaints about assessment. And it's almost, you don't even know what's going on because it's so seamless. It's a well-oiled machine. It's had great leadership, but I do still expect you to grill Hope, okay? Don't let her off on that. I don't want to go deep into this because Commissioner Key kind of already hit it. It's like everybody gets their ACT Aspire results, and then all of a sudden it's like people are disappointed. And the message I keep wanting to send to districts and to our state is these summative ACT Aspire results should only tell us what we already know. They're at the end of the year. If we have major ahas right now, then it's too late. We know where we are in reading. We know where we are in math. We know the things that we have to continue to be working on, and our assessment results pretty much remain steady and confirmed that the areas we're working on, we still have a lot of work to do. Our assessment, ACT Aspire, is not like the old benchmark that we used to give in our state. Okay, you cannot game the system with the test and all of a sudden have a huge jump. The state does not automatically control the cut scores each year and change it and adjust it and tell parents their kids are proficient on a test, only getting, a fraction of them correct. That's not what this assessment's about. It is a rigorous assessment aligned to the ACT Aspire the ACT readiness scores for college. And we've kept those readiness scores at that higher level. Remediation for most of our colleges in the state is a 19. Most of our average composite score for the ACT is an 18. I'm not surprised by that. We know how many Arkansans actually have a college degree, right? We want to change that trajectory. All right, we've been on that for a long time, and that's what we're looking at doing. So, although I got my ACT score, we got our ACT Aspire scores, and really, I'm the same way. I open them up, and I want to be just wowed, okay? I want to be wowed. And I wasn't. But at the same time, I wasn't disappointed because there are so many indicators that we're doing the right work, and we got to keep on doing the right work. And I don't want us to lower the cut scores on the test because I believe they're at the right rigor. I do want to dispel the myth that because a student scores close doesn't mean they're not performing at grade level. And that is something different, okay? You'll hear people take the in need of support and close scores and say, these kids can't read. That's not necessarily true. Scoring close, depending on where you are on the scale score, and there's a range. Okay, but if you score on the top end of close, you're probably on the 11th grade ACT, you're probably hitting around that 19, okay? That's not necessarily meeting the higher level of rigor we want for the different areas, right? But it doesn't mean you can't read. So don't think that, but if you're in needs of support, we have great concern. And we have legislation about in needs of support, and we've got to change that. Too many schools, too many kids in that category. But don't get that close means the student's not doing okay. They may likely well be doing okay, but need more rigorous support. We need more intensive instruction. If they're on the lower end of that scale score for close, they probably are not at grade level. So I just kind of want to put that out there. I'm going to turn it over to Hope, let her kind of go quickly over the scores. But again, you're going to see that we pretty much remain steady. But if you have a difficult question, I highly encourage you to ask it.
Good morning, Hope Worsham, Director of Assessment. I do just want to echo what Stacy said. It is amazing to me every year when I look back at the number of tests that are given across our state and the seamlessness that does run from my team. So thank you. There's about half of them here today. There's some that aren't out. They are amazing and probably going to be the hardest thing to leave. So if you look at the vision and the mission and goals of the Arkansas Department of Education, the assessment touches 3 out of the 5 directly because we are using parts of the data from different assessments to measure 3 of our 5 goals. And so I think it's important to always remind ourselves of that the assessment is, like Ms. Smith said, it's the end. It should already confirm what we know, but it is a measure of where we are. And we shouldn't be surprised. Again, I'm like her. I want to open up the scores and see 99% of our kids on track for college and career readiness, and that's just not the reality. We have a lot of hard work to do. We are a very high poverty state, and our schools are working very hard in the right direction. And curriculum, instruction, all those other things lay the foundation and build towards better success on the assessment. So let's start with our K-2 scores. As you know, we have 3 different assessment programs. For reading, you can see there the 3 different programs are giving us very similar information about the number of students that are scoring at the 40th percentile for reading. Now, what you have to understand with 40th percentile for ACT Aspire, if you're going to hit that ready category, that's closer to the 60th percentile. But 40th percentile is one measure that all 3 of the vendors use consistently, and so that's why I just put this up. We don't encourage schools to compare across assessments because they do have their own nuances. NWA has some differences to Renaissance and to iStation. But the encouraging thing from our end is that all 3 are giving similar information to the schools. We see similar performance. So that indicates to us the reliability of all 3 assessments, and we hope to see the same when our 4th vendor is added. We do have some room to grow with our reading. Again, it's like Ms. Smith said, just because a student's not hitting ready on ACT Aspire does not mean they can't read. Based on our K-2 results, 60 to 70% of our kids are reading where they should be at the end of year assessment according to other grade level norms that they have set in their programs. But that still indicates we have 40 up to 40% of kids that still need some support in getting to where they need to be with reading. With math, a similar thing. We do see a little bit lower percentage of students hitting the 40th percentile for NWA. But again, very similar numbers there. Now, you don't see a line for Renaissance and kindergarten because they do not have a separate math assessment that's actually part of their reading assessment. It's a nuance there. But again, same idea. We're seeing similar numbers across the 3 assessments. We still have room to grow there. Our math scores tend to be a little bit higher than our reading scores just in general in K-2. So again, similar percentages. Reading instruction continues to be a focus. It has to be a focus, and we know that in our state, and I think that's evident by all the energy that is put into RISE and the emphasis on that. For ACT Aspire, I just want to reiterate what Ms. Smith said, that ready does not necessarily mean that a student can't read or can't do math or isn't on grade level. Ready indicates that child is heading toward, they're progressing appropriately towards the ACT benchmark for that subject at that time if they take the ACT in 11th grade. So for example, that math benchmark is a 22, which is higher than what we would consider our remediation. Close indicates a student is in need of some support to meet the readiness benchmark, but it's not necessarily performing below grade level. And if you'll remember in our ESSA weighted achievement, schools do get points for students in close, ready, and in need of support. And so really my focus when I was looking at data this year was to look at, are we moving out of the in need of support? Is in need of support shrinking and the other one's growing? That's what we want to see, and we do see that in some of our content areas. I just pulled this from ACT. Results suggest that high school graduates need a strong academic foundation, regardless of their post-secondary path they choose. I think a lot of times we get a little sidetracked thinking that, well, not every kid's going to college, so they don't all need the ACT. But in reality, the skills that plumbers need are the same skills that students need to be successful in algebra, in college algebra. So having that high rigor, teaching to that high rigor, I'm very much a fan of teaching in the content, but it still needs to be at a high rigor so students are getting the skills they need before they leave. And that has been verified time and time again by research from ACT and other companies as well. So here are our scores. You can see the asterisk grade level and content areas are places where we did see statistically significant increases this year. There are times when you can look at scores and you'll see like a 0.1% increase, a 0.2, sometimes even a 0.7 increase is not statistically significant. So I think it is important to remember that. We see several places where we have increases that are statistically significant, which means our schools are moving in the right direction. And again, when I looked at that in need of support number for each of the subject areas, that is shrinking, particularly in math across our state. We see that happening. So that chart was visual is a little bit easier for me to see. I don't know about if it is for you guys, but you can see across the grades. So this is our English performance. We do see higher performance in English just in general across the board, but if you look at the ACT readiness benchmark for English, it's lower than the other three. So we would expect to see higher percentages in English. Again, also it's a multiple choice test, so which tends to be a little bit easier for kids, fully multiple choice. We see a consistent trend. 9th and 10th grade kind of drops off a little bit. Not really sure why that happens, but that's pretty consistent across all subjects. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, if you could expand a little bit on the difference between English and reading.
Sure.
And what that looks like.
Yep, so the English assessment is more the mechanics of English, and so the student will have to, similar to the ACT, you'll read in a passage and things like editing or pulling out main, what's this word for, what could you replace this word for, whereas English gets more, the reading assessment, they'll read passages. There will be some multiple choice items that maybe go to main idea or to theme or things like that, purpose, author's purpose, but then there's also open response items on the reading assessment as well that are testing students' comprehension of that reading passage.
Okay, that makes sense. And does that lead to the discrepancies in the scores between English and reading, or what?
I don't know. It could possibly. You see the same trend on the ACT that students tend to score higher in English than they do in reading. So it's kind of a national trend, and it could be that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's an interesting question too. Doesn't mind mine. Okay, so if you're thinking about it's tracked to the ACT readiness scores in 11th grade, and then what those courses are tracked to in college or first year. So in the English score, it's tied to Comp 1 for a freshman entering college. Okay, the reading scores are actually tracked to what you call social science courses, which are your histories, your psychology. So you can think about the difference in the reading and the writing. So that's a way to think about it too. And if we're going to really improve our reading scores, we've got to start talking to our social studies teachers, our science teachers, our physics. I mean, what are we doing in those courses to guarantee that our students are going to be actively literate and be able to not only read, but digest and take apart and have discussion and be able to communicate with? There's a kind of a different level of rigor there. And 18 is the, for reading, you only have to make an 18 on the ACT to meet the readiness score for English. But for reading, it's a 22? It's a 22. So that's another gap.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Newton?
Could you speak to the difference in the exam between 8th grade and then when it bumps to 9th and 10th grade?
So the exam design, there's not much difference, particularly for English. There's really not. It's a fully multiple choice test at both grade levels. When we get into math, and I may have to refer to JJ because she knows more than I do even. She studies it all the time. When we get into math and reading, there are less open response on the high school test, correct, than on the 3 through 8 test.
Okay. Then, is the 9th and 10th grade more like the actual ACT exam, so the level
Yes.
of rigor is?
From our reviews and looking at the performance level descriptors, they do tend to line up a little bit better at 9th and 10th grade with the ACT exam. And that's the whole purpose of the design. We know that. So it is designed to lead towards predicting performance on the ACT.
So do you think that could have something to do with the drop-off between 8th and 9th and 10th?
It could. As a former high school math teacher, also have a very strong opinion that we still teach very traditionally in our high schools, and that could also have an impact. There's lots of things that could have an impact. Just the change between 8th and 9th grade and students, test fatigue, all of those could impact there. But we definitely have some room to grow in our high schools in teaching critical thinking and teaching kids to use what they're learning in class, and like Ms. Smith said, reading across the curriculum. We're not reading in every classroom every day like I think we could be.
Thank you.
So for math, no big surprises. We do see this kind of decline in 6th grade. I don't really have a reason for that, but that is something that we're seeing when we look at cohort data. So you're looking at different groups of kids every year. When you look at cohort data, you don't see as big of drops. But again, we're not shocked by our results, and we know that we have the Math Quest that's going on across the state right now that really is focusing at that middle to high school level and critical thinking and mathematics there. And as a math person, I'd like to see that kind of area grow. The math benchmark is also very significantly high, it's a 22. So when you look compared English to math, it's not surprising that those percentages are slightly lower. So for reading, again, holding steady pretty much across the years here. Slight increases in some areas and slight decreases in others. And for science, you see a pretty steady hold across there. And if I'm going too fast, please tell me and I'll slow down. For ELA, the reason you only see 2 scores, I don't know if you remember from last year, but there was a change in the cut scores for ELA, and so for accurate comparisons, we only gave you 2 years of ELA. We do see pretty steady increase in several grades here for ELA, and don't really know why that is, but just encouraging to see that our schools there's a focus there on ELA. That score is a straight combination of writing, English, and reading. It's an average of the 3. We do not get a writing scale score anymore, so you didn't see writing pulled out separately. It is included here in the ELA score. What's very important, again, are different types of writing being represented across the board. So are we reading and writing in all content areas? And where we see schools doing that well, they have very high ELA scores.
May I ask a question on that?
Yep.
Are you able to see scores from open response versus multiple choice?
So we are not with ACT Aspire. Now with writing, the schools do get what we call rubric scores. So they have four or five areas that they're scored in, and the schools actually see their rubric score, and they have the rubrics available to see, if a student is scoring a 1, these are kind of the things that they're able to do if they're scoring a 2. So they do get that information.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Can you go back to the math and the reading?
So there's math and there's reading.
Okay, I'm still looking at that drop off between the 8th to 9th and 10th grade. That's very concerning. And what might be some possible reasons behind that, but it wasn't as much on the ELA.
Ms. Newton, would you
I'm sorry.
get closer to the mic?
It wasn't
Sorry.
as much on the ELA, so, I'm just.
If we look at ELA.
Just wondering.
Go ahead.
We kind of had the same questions in-house too. I think that because of that drop and because of the different tests, I think it's probably most appropriate that we probably need to round up with ACT and the ACT Power folks and just have some real frank conversation around the difference of the test. What do they see what's nationally, what is it looking like? What's it looking like for our state? And maybe just kind of dive into that deeper. I think that's because we kind of had the same questions too.
Yeah.
And the further you get, so we know we keep saying this alignment to the benchmarks. the 9th and 10th grade alignment to the ACT is much tighter
Right.
than going backwards, because the ACT Aspire has not been going, as, I don't even know what word, I'm tongue-tied now. There you go, thank you. So it's not as strong the further away you get from it.
That makes me wonder, you know, are we right on target at the 9th and 10th grade level?
And dropping, or
are
yeah.
we not, you just said which
Right.
way are we on target
Which
at?
one's tighter? You
Right.
probably have it tighter at the 9th and 10th, but, you know, are there things we need to be doing instructionally? There are, but I think we have, there's some bigger questions there on the assessment piece to
Yeah.
look at. We can do that.
So our STEM scores, STEM is an average of math and science. We don't use the STEM scores in the state accountability system in any way. We do use the previous ones at the moment. So that's ACT Aspire. One other just point on the ACT Aspire with alignment is we have completed the alignment study, and we are in the works of releasing those results. And so I'm sure that Ms. Smith will be bringing those to you guys in the coming months. But just very encouraging results from our educators across the state that sat down and looked at the Aspire test and gave very honest and clean feedback about the alignment to our standards in our state. And so I look forward to you guys being able to see that and get that out across the state as well, because I think that information will help our teachers with transparency on the Aspire assessment. Dynamic learning maps we talked in depth about yesterday. I won't spend much time here. You saw the numbers there. This is our first year of administration. In fact, Deb and Ann, who are in the room today, have been on the road all week this week giving those trainings, and I got a little update this morning about how those have gone. So we will continue to train. We've actually already looked at a plan for next summer of taking some of our teachers that are currently giving the Dynamic Learning Maps assessment and have them be our trainers. Because what better way to show what works in the classroom than highlight our teachers? And so I think that assessment, it's very sound, it's a very good assessment, and I think it's a very good teaching tool for our teachers, and especially with the population that in some instances has been neglected a bit in that regard. So we're very excited about it, and like you can see, we have 650 teachers this summer attending training, and hopefully have a similar number next summer. For the 11th grade ACT, like we've talked about, here are the benchmarks for the ACT. So one thing particularly to note is that STEM benchmark is a 26, which is very high. So when if you see any kind of STEM comparison, that is because for ACT, the STEM benchmark is tracking towards success in upper level science and math classes like calculus, upper level chemistry, biology, things like that. So that's why that is significantly higher, and it should be. But you can see the English score is an 18, 22, 22, and 23. So when you see the numbers of our students performing there. So just like we talked about before with English, tends to be a bit higher. These are our 11th grade students on the 11th grade administration of the ACT that the state paid for. And these are the percent of kids that actually met the benchmark. So we see English significantly higher than the others, but our composite score, 14% of our kids, 14 to 13% have been scoring, meeting that composite benchmark. In all four areas, excuse me. That means they've met the benchmark in all four areas, excuse me. The average score for the ACT in the state of Arkansas has not changed much over the past few years. And the one place that we did see a pretty good big drop this year was in math. There's no explanation for that. You can see it went from 18.4 was the average score last year to 17.9 this year. We did test about 400 more students this year than last year, but nationally, I've talked with other states and they are actually seeing a similar drop. So I've asked ACT, they have not indicated any change in the tests. There's no change in the scores. But we did see that kind of drop nationally.
I want to clarify. I want to make sure you guys realize this is the ACT that our 11th graders took. Okay, so we will come back in the fall with scores that show what our graduating seniors' last ACT score was. So there's a little bit of difference. This is 11th grade only, and a lot of these kids, this is the first time to ever take the assessment.
So for 11th grade, holding steady. The majority of our 11th graders are now participating. There's a very small number that does not. For the 11th grade ACT is the only test a student can choose to not participate in if they want to. So if you've already got your score you want, you don't have to take advantage of the free opportunity. But we're not really seeing that. We're at around 99+% of our kids participating, very low not. So in summary of our assessment system in general, our scores are holding steady. They confirm what we know, and our message, and I appreciate Ms. Smith and Commissioner Key for always pushing the message that solid instructional practices are what's important. The assessment is part of that, and I know it tends to become the focus, but if we don't focus on instruction, the assessment will not change. They're going to continue to hold steady, and so I think we have a very strong focus towards that in our state. And I'm very proud to have been a part of that. Is there anything I can answer for you, or any questions you may have?
Dr. Moore? Mr. Williamson? Ms. McFetridge? Anybody on this side? Okay, I have some random questions.
Random away.
Do you know, or do they all, of the K-2 tests align with best with the ACT Aspire?
So that's a great question. Two of the programs have done what we call like a concordant study, and so they are able to predict performance on the Aspire assessment. So that is Renaissance and NWA. iStation is doing that study this summer. So by next school year, all three will be able to at least give a prediction on the ACT Aspire. What is very important to remember, though, is those are very differently designed tests. So it's not that the test design lines up, but with any standardized test, what we typically see is if students do well on standardized tests, it's not typically individual to a particular test. And so you are able to do some studies and see if we're scoring about here on this test, we're scoring about here on this test. So by the end of next year, all three of our K-2 tests will have that in place, so schools can run a report that says, based on our K-2 results, this is the % of our kids that are predicted to be on track for ready.
And how long does an English as a second language student, are they in the district before their test scores start counting toward the schools and the district score?
So if I say this wrong, please correct me. Their first year in the U.S., the scores do not count. They participate, but they do not count. The second year, only growth counts, and the third year, everything counts.
Okay, because I think there was some misunderstanding that people were saying, oh, well, if they enrolled and they start the test tomorrow, we're going to, their test count. But I knew that wasn't accurate, but I wanted to know the specifics, yep. Okay? Also, will we get a link to this presentation? Can we do that?
Yes.
Okay, that'll be great. And are we doing anything? I know we're trying to emphasize the positive and emphasize support rather than monitoring. Are we doing anything, or we just hope they have enough gumption, as my dad would say, to encourage districts to celebrate those areas, the teachers, the group of kids, a school for beating the odds, as we used to call it, those kinds of things, so that maybe they go, oh, well, kids will do almost anything to get recognized. So teachers would stand to reason that they would too. And I know there are a lot of teachers, the night the test came out, they were going, oh, I'm trying to find mine, and so what are we doing from the department to draw attention to those who beat the odds?
So that is one of the core principles of professional learning communities, is to celebrate your successes, whether they're in the formative or the summative mode. Deb Kaufman's group, I believe it's Alexandra Boyd, is going through and looking for those outliers. Where did we see places where we had significant jumps? I think Dr. Flowers has probably been involved in some of that. And then we've been having discussions about going and seeing those schools and finding out exactly what they're doing and being able to put that information out to other school districts so that they can go visit some place that's got something going on well, kind of the who's in our state in different areas. So right now we do have a team of people kind of dissecting and looking for where those outliers are.
And another thing, you're talking about the skills that may be missing, not I can actually call words and I can comprehend most of it, but when they first started doing testing and districts were comparing themselves to other districts, we did a semester of critical thinking and a semester of study skills with all of our 6th graders. And we saw significant difference. So is there room within the seat time at the middle school, junior high level, if a district decided to interject those kinds of courses, or have we got so many demands on what they have to do that there's just not any time left?
I do think in a middle school setting, you do have appropriate time to be able to pull that in. There's different ways and different scheduling that you can do in a middle school, and those would most definitely fit. I know that our partners at Arkansas Career Education or the division of whatever they are, yeah, thank you, Secretary Key. They have some courses specific to middle school that work specifically on those things. So it probably, as we come together and we really start studying some of their courses, again, trying to shine a flashlight on what those courses are and giving support to districts to be able to implement those courses well. It's just kind of like the critical reading and the strategic reading courses. Critical reading's been around for a long time, but we really dug into it. We shone a flashlight on it, figured out why kids weren't taking it, gave it some credit, opened up the areas in which teachers could teach that course, and then you saw an increase in the number of students enrolling in it. So the same thing could probably happen in that.
Yeah. Because I have a feeling, even as parents, we'll say, go to your room and study. And the kid gets there and goes, okay, do I read it twice? What does study look like, or how do I study? So anything we can do to encourage the districts to think about that. Anything else? Thank you for your report.
Thank you very much.
And best wishes in your new job.
Thank you.
Reluctantly.
Thanks.
Okay. Do I hear a move to adjourn? Ms. Dean, move. Second, Ms. Chambers. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Be sure and put on your calendar for July 30th if you are able to attend or phone in.